I never thought owning a home in Pine Ridge, Colorado would turn into a full-blown war with the neighborhood HOA. But here we are. And honestly, I should have seen it coming the moment that woman moved in next door. My name is Jensen, and I run a small towing and auto repair business from my property just outside the main subdivision. I say outside because technically, my lot sits right on the boundary line, which means I get all the HOA nonsense without actually being fully under their jurisdiction. It's complicated, but my lawyer assured me when I bought the place 5 years ago that my commercial operation was grandfathered in and completely legal. The previous owner had run a landscaping business from the same spot for 20 years. Everything was fine until last spring when Deborah Harrison got elected as the new HOA president. She was exactly what you'd picture when someone says the word Karen. Mid-40s, that specific haircut that defies all logic, always wearing those tight-lipped smiles that never reach the eyes, and she had opinions about everything. Within her first month, she tried to fine me for having my work trucks visible from the street. Never mind that they were parked on my property. Never mind that the previous HOA had never had an issue. Deborah had decided that my business was an eyesore, and she was going to do something about it. I fought back, naturally. Got my lawyer involved, showed all the documentation proving I had every right to operate my business exactly as I had been. Deborah backed off, but I could tell she was just waiting for another opportunity. She sent me passive-aggressive emails about keeping noise down, about making sure no fluids leaked onto the ground, about ensuring my customers didn't park on the street. All things I was already doing, but she needed me to know she was watching. The real trouble started in October when Deborah called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't required to attend since I wasn't technically in the HOA, but my neighbor Frank Wilson gave me the rundown. Deborah had decided that tire chains were now banned throughout the entire neighborhood, including the roads leading up to and through Pine Ridge. Now, if you don't live in Colorado, you might not understand how insane this is. We get serious snow here. The subdivision sits at about 7,000 feet elevation, and the winters are no joke. The main highway gets plowed regularly, but our neighborhood roads are privately maintained, and the HOA had always been cheap about snow removal. Most of us had 4-wheel drive vehicles and kept chains in our trunks for the really bad days. It was just common sense. But Deborah had decided that tire chains damaged the asphalt. She presented some study she'd found online, probably on page 17 of a Google search, that claimed chains caused premature wear on road surfaces. Never mind that chains are legal throughout Colorado, including on state highways. Never mind that the alternative was people getting stuck or sliding into ditches. Deborah wanted pristine roads, and she was going to get them. The vote passed because most people at the meeting were the usual crowd who showed up to these things, the ones who cared more about following rules than common sense. Frank told me it was something like 22-8 in favor of the ban. The fine for violating the new rule. $500 per occurrence. I laughed when Frank told me. Good thing I'm not actually in the HOA then, I said. Frank shook his head. She's claiming the ban applies to anyone driving on neighborhood roads, whether they're residents or not. Says it's about protecting community infrastructure. That's not legally enforceable, I said. She can't make rules for people who aren't in the HOA. Try telling her that. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the meeting, I found a formal letter in my mailbox. It was from Deborah, printed on official Pine Ridge HOA letterhead, informing me that the tire chain ban applied to all vehicles operating on neighborhood roads, and that any violation would result in fines. legal action, and potential towing of my vehicle at my expense. She'd even underlined that last part twice. I called my lawyer, Gerald Martinez. He'd handled the previous dispute with the HOA and knew the situation well. "She can't do that," Gerald said after I read him the letter. "The HOA has authority over its members and, to some extent, the common areas they maintain. But they can't create traffic laws. That's the jurisdiction of the county. If she tries to fine you or tow your vehicle, that's harassment at minimum, possibly theft if she actually has your vehicle towed. So I can ignore this completely. In fact, save that letter. If she escalates, it's evidence of harassment." I filed the letter away and went about my business. Winter was coming and I needed to prepare. November in Colorado means getting serious about winter equipment. I serviced all my trucks, made sure the plows were ready, checked my chains, and stocked up on ice melt and sand. My towing business saw a significant uptick in winter, mostly pulling people out of ditches and jump-starting dead batteries in the cold. The first real snow hit right before Thanksgiving. We got about 8 inches overnight, and the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. I was up at 5 in the morning, plowing my driveway and the small parking area where my customers left their vehicles. The subdivision roads were a mess. The HOA's contracted plow service hadn't shown up yet, and people were already sliding around trying to get to work. I got my first call at 6:15. A lady from 2 streets over had slid into a ditch. I loaded up my flatbed, threw my chains in the truck bed just in case, and headed out. The roads were worse than I'd thought. The snow had that wet, heavy consistency that turns to ice when it gets compressed. Even with 4-wheel drive, my truck was struggling for traction on the hills. I pulled the lady's sedan out without much trouble and was heading back home when I saw Deborah standing at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, watching me. She was wearing a puffy pink jacket and boots that looked more fashionable than functional. As I drove past, she held up her phone, clearly taking photos or video of my truck. I didn't think much of it until that afternoon when another letter appeared in my mailbox. This one informed me that I'd been observed operating a commercial vehicle on neighborhood roads during a time when she claimed I should have been using chains. Therefore, I was in violation of the tire chain ban and was being fined $500. The circular logic was actually impressive in its absurdity. I called Gerald again. "She's documenting that you weren't using chains, to claim you're creating a safety hazard, but also saying if you do use chains, you'll be fined for violating her ban." Gerald sounded both amused and annoyed. "That's entrapment in spirit if not in legal definition. Don't pay anything. I'll draft a response." Gerald sent Deborah a cease and desist letter, making it clear that she had no authority over me, that her attempted fines were harassment, and that any further action would result in legal consequences for her and the HOA. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. December brought more snow and much colder temperatures. The HOA's plow service was unreliable at best, and the subdivision roads turned into an obstacle course of ice patches and compressed snow. My business was booming. I was pulling 2 or 3 cars out of ditches every day, and I'd gotten contracts with several local businesses to keep their parking lots clear. The tire chain ban was causing exactly the problems anyone with half a brain could have predicted. People were getting stuck, sliding backwards on hills and generally struggling to get anywhere. But Deborah was holding firm. She'd even started a social media campaign about protecting neighborhood infrastructure, posting photos of minor cracks in the asphalt that she claimed were caused by tire chains, conveniently ignoring that those cracks existed because of freeze-thaw cycles and inadequate maintenance. I started seeing people from the neighborhood at my shop, asking if I could help them get around the ban. Some wanted studded tires installed, which were still technically legal under HOA rules. Others asked about chains they could quickly install and remove before entering the subdivision. I helped where I could, but mostly I told them they needed to vote Deborah out at the next election. The situation escalated 2 weeks before Christmas. We got a major storm system that dropped nearly 2 feet of snow over a 36-hour period. The county declared a state of emergency and most businesses closed. I was working around the clock, helping people who'd gotten stuck on the highways or needed emergency transport. On the second day of the storm, right around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered because during weather like this, every call could be an emergency. Jensen's towing, this is Connor. Yes, hello, this is Deborah Harrison. I'm the president of the Pine Ridge HOA. Her voice was crisp and professional, but I could hear something else underneath. Stress, maybe, or fear. I know who you are, Mrs. Harrison. What can I do for you? There was a pause. I need a tow. I'm stuck on Ridgeline Drive just past the turn onto Aspen Court. My vehicle went into the ditch. I'll admit, I enjoyed the moment more than I probably should have. I see. And you've called other towing services. You're the closest. And with the emergency declaration, I'm told most other services are prioritizing highway calls. She wasn't wrong. The state patrol had asked all available tow trucks to focus on the main roads first. What kind of vehicle? I asked. A BMW X5. It's only been in the ditch for about 20 minutes. I don't think there's any damage, I just need someone to pull it out. I looked out my window at the still falling snow. Ridgeline Drive was one of the steeper roads in the subdivision, and Aspen Court was at the top of the ridge. If she'd gone into the ditch there, it meant the roads were basically impassable without chains. Current conditions out there are pretty bad, I said. I'll need to use my chains to safely make it up Ridgeline. Silence on the other end. I could practically hear her internal struggle. Mrs. Harrison, your chains, she finally said. On the neighborhood roads. Yes, madam. It's not safe for me to attempt that recovery without them. The road's too steep and too icy. More silence. Then, in a much quieter voice, how much? Standard rate is $200 for a basic recovery. Given the weather and conditions, I'd call it $250. Plus any environmental cleanup if there are fluids leaking. Fine. Just please hurry. It's very cold out here. I bundled up in my insulated coveralls, grabbed my gear, and hooked up to my heavy-duty tow truck. The chains went on all 4 wheels because I wasn't taking any chances. The sound of them clanking as I drove was loud in the quiet of the snow-covered neighborhood. Normally, I'd consider it obnoxious, but today it felt a bit like playing a victory song. The drive to Ridgeline was slow and careful. Several cars were abandoned along the sides of roads, their owners having given up and walked home. The subdivision looked beautiful under all the snow, like a Christmas card, but it was also completely treacherous. My chains bit into the ice underneath the fresh powder, giving me the traction I needed to keep moving forward. I found Deborah's BMW nose down in the ditch on the right side of Ridgeline, about 100 feet past the Aspen Court intersection. It wasn't a bad accident, just a slide off, but the angle was steep enough that she'd needed help. She was sitting inside the vehicle, and I could see her on her phone when I pulled up. I got out and walked over to her window. She rolled it down, and a blast of warm air hit my face. Mrs. Harrison, I'm going to need you to get out of the vehicle while I work. You can wait in my truck if you want to stay warm. She looked at my truck, at the chains clearly visible on my tires, and something flickered across her face. Anger, embarrassment, I couldn't tell. Those chains, she started. are necessary for me to do my job safely," I interrupted. "If you want to wait until the roads are clear enough that I don't need them, that's your choice. But that might not be until spring." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded and gathered her purse and phone. I helped her climb out of the ditch, the snow coming up past her fashion boots, and got her settled in my passenger seat. The recovery itself was straightforward. I'd done hundreds just like it. I hooked the tow cable to her front axle, used my truck's winch to pull the BMW back onto solid ground, and checked for damage. A few scratches on the front bumper, nothing serious. No fluids leaking. "You're all set," I said, walking back to my truck. "That'll be $250. Deborah had been watching the whole operation with a sour expression. "You're charging me full price." "Yes, madam. That's my standard rate for these conditions. Even though I'm the HOA president, I'm not in your HOA, so that doesn't really affect me one way or another." She pulled out her phone and tapped at it for a moment. "I can send you payment through Venmo or Zelle. Either works. My information's on my business card." I handed her one, and she sent the payment while sitting there. My phone dinged with the confirmation. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "You're welcome. Drive safe, and maybe consider some actual winter tires." She climbed out of my truck and walked back to her BMW without another word. I watched as she started it up and slowly, carefully began driving back down the hill. She made it about 50 feet before her tires started spinning and she began sliding backwards. I put my truck in park and waited. She tried again, getting a bit further this time, but the road was just too icy. After the third attempt, she stopped, got out, and walked back to my truck. "I can't make it down," she admitted, not meeting my eyes. "The road's pretty icy. You need chains." "I don't have chains." "I can sell you a set. I keep some in stock. $200 and I'll install them for you." I could see her doing the mental math, weighing the cost against her pride. Pride lost. Fine. I dug out a set of chains that would fit her BMW and got to work installing them. They weren't as heavy-duty as the ones on my truck, but they'd be enough to get her home safely. The whole time I worked, she stood there shivering, having refused my offer to wait in the warm truck again. "There you go," I said, finishing up the last chain. "These should get you where you need to go. And I suppose you'll expect me to remove them as soon as I reach my driveway, per the HOA rules." I stood up and looked at her directly. "Mrs. Harrison, I expect you to do whatever keeps you and your neighbors safe. The chains don't damage the roads. That's been proven over and over again. What damages roads is the freeze-thaw cycle, inadequate maintenance, and vehicles spinning their tires trying to get traction on ice. The studies say. One questionable study says chains might cause minor additional wear under specific circumstances. Dozens of studies, including ones from the Colorado Department of Transportation, say chains are safe and effective. You picked the one that supported what you wanted to believe." Her face flushed red. "You don't get to lecture me about." "I'm not lecturing. I'm just pointing out facts. Now, do you want to get home safely or do you want to stand here arguing?" She got back in her BMW and drove away without another word. The chains clinked against her wheel wells as she went. I packed up my gear and headed home, figuring that would finally be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, after the snow had stopped and the main roads were clear, I found another letter from Deborah. This one informed me that I'd been observed violating the tire chain ban on multiple occasions, and that the HOA was pursuing legal action to prevent me from using chains on neighborhood roads. She also demanded reimbursement for the chains I'd sold her, claiming I'd taken advantage of her during an emergency. That was the last straw. I forwarded everything to Gerald, along with photos I'd taken during the recovery showing the road conditions and her vehicle. I also sent him screenshots of her payment for my services, including the chains, with no complaints or reservations noted at the time of transaction. Gerald was quiet for a long moment after reviewing everything. Then he said, "She's really doubling down on this. Apparently. Can she actually do anything? No. But she can waste everyone's time and money trying. Let me handle this. I think it's time we made it clear that continued harassment will have consequences." Gerald sent a much more strongly worded letter to both Deborah and the HOA board. He outlined every interaction, made it clear that her ban was unenforceable, explained that her attempts to fine me constituted harassment, and noted that demanding reimbursement for a product she'd voluntarily purchased was potentially fraudulent. He gave them 10 days to formally rescind any fines or demands, or we'd file a harassment lawsuit. The response came not from Deborah, but from another board member, a guy named Tom Mitchell who I'd done work for in the past. He called me directly. "Connor, this is getting out of hand," he said. "I just want you to know that several of us on the board didn't support the chain ban in the first place. We got outvoted, and Deborah's been running with it like it's her personal crusade. I appreciate that, Tom, but I'm not going to back down. She's in the wrong here. I know." And after your lawyer's letter, we had an emergency board meeting. Deborah's still insisting she's right, but the rest of us voted to suspend enforcement of the ban pending a legal review. We also agreed that any attempted fines against you are nullified. That's a start. But the ban itself needs to go. We're working on it. There's going to be a special election in February. I think you'll see some changes in leadership. That should have resolved things, but Deborah wasn't done. She couldn't fine me officially anymore, but she started a campaign of petty harassment. She'd call the county code enforcement claiming I was violating commercial zoning laws, which led to inspectors showing up and confirming I was in full compliance. She reported my trucks for noise violations during the one time I had to run a piece of equipment at 7 in the morning on a Saturday. She even tried to claim my business was attracting vermin, leading to a visit from animal control who found absolutely nothing. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed, but each one cost me time and stress. Gerald suggested we document everything for a potential harassment suit, but I was hoping it wouldn't come to that. The situation reached its peak in early January. We got another major storm, this one predicted to be even worse than the pre-Christmas system. The Weather Service was calling for 30 inches of snow and wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. The governor activated the National Guard to help with anticipated emergencies, and everyone was being told to stay home unless absolutely necessary. I prepped as much as I could, knowing I'd be busy once the storm hit. I stocked up on fuel, food, and supplies. I made sure all my equipment was ready to go. And yes, I had chains ready for all my vehicles. The storm hit on a Tuesday night and didn't let up until Thursday morning. I spent those 2 days responding to emergencies, pulling people out of ditches, helping first responders get to where they needed to be, and generally working until I was ready to collapse. The subdivision was a disaster. The HOA's plow service never showed up at all, their truck having broken down in Denver. The roads became impassable for anyone without serious winter equipment. By Thursday afternoon, when the snow finally stopped, I'd been awake for nearly 40 hours straight. I'd just gotten home and was looking forward to food and sleep when my phone rang again. Another unfamiliar number, Jensen's Towing. "Mr. Jensen, this is Patricia Simmons. I'm on the HOA board with Tom Mitchell. We have a situation and we desperately need your help." "What kind of situation?" The storm damaged several homes in the subdivision. Collapsed roofs from snow load mostly. We have contractors ready to come in and start emergency repairs, but they can't get through. The roads are completely blocked. We need someone with heavy equipment who can clear a path. What about your regular plow service? They're still stuck in Denver and don't expect to have their truck repaired for at least 3 more days. We have families who have had to evacuate their homes, Mr. Jensen. Kids and elderly people staying with neighbors because their houses aren't safe. Please, we'll pay whatever your rate is. I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion making my head fuzzy. My rate for commercial snow removal in these conditions is $400 an hour, 4-hour minimum, and I'll need to use chains on my equipment. There was a pause, then a muffled conversation I couldn't quite make out. Then Patricia came back on. The board agrees to your terms, all of them. How soon can you start? Give me 2 hours. I need to eat something and check over my equipment. Thank you so much. I grabbed food, took a quick shower to wake myself up, and headed out to my largest truck, the one with the heavy plow blade. The chains went on, and I started making my way through the subdivision. It was slow work. The snow was deep, heavy, and had drifted in places to create 4- and 5-foot walls across the roads. But the truck was a beast, and the chains gave me the traction I needed to push through. I worked my way through the main roads first, creating paths wide enough for emergency vehicles and the contractors who were supposedly on their way. People came out of their houses to watch, some even cheering as I cleared their streets. I saw Tom Mitchell outside his house at one point, and he gave me a big thumbs up. What I didn't see was Deborah. Not that I was looking for her, but I was curious how she was handling all this. Her street, Oak Grove Lane, was one of the ones I needed to clear. And as I made my way down it, I noticed several houses with blue tarps on their roofs and signs of significant damage. The snow load had been too much for some of the older constructions. I was making the final pass down Oak Grove when I saw Deborah's BMW stuck at the end of her driveway. She was outside trying to shovel, but the snow was so deep and heavy that she was barely making progress. I slowed down as I passed, and she looked up at me. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then I saw something in her expression crack. Not quite defeat, but close. Recognition, maybe, that she'd been wrong. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. "You need help?" "I need to get to the community center," she said. "They're using it as a temporary shelter for people whose homes were damaged. I'm supposed to be there coordinating with the Red Cross." I looked at her driveway, at the mountain of snow blocking her in, then at my truck. I was tired, sore, and more than a little annoyed at this woman who'd made my life difficult for months over something stupid. The petty part of me wanted to drive away. But the practical part of me, the part that had spent the last 2 days helping people regardless of who they were, won out. "I'll clear your driveway. Give me 10 minutes." Her eyes widened. "I can't pay you right now, I don't. The HOA's already paying me for the road clearing. I'll throw this in as part of the job." I didn't wait for her response. I repositioned the truck and started clearing her driveway, pushing the heavy snow into manageable piles on the sides. It took closer to 15 minutes, but when I finished, she had a clear path from her garage to the street. She approached my window again as I was preparing to move on. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know I haven't been fair to you." "No, you haven't. I thought I was protecting the neighborhood, the property values, the infrastructure. You were protecting your idea of what the neighborhood should be without listening to what people actually needed." She looked down at the snow. "The chain ban was a mistake, wasn't it?" "Yes. I'm going to call for a vote to rescind it tomorrow as soon as we have phone service restored to everyone. That would be good." She nodded and walked back to her car. I watched her carefully navigate down the freshly cleared street, her BMW sliding a bit on the packed snow. No chains on her tires, despite everything that had happened. I finished the road clearing job around 7 that evening, 13 hours after I'd started. Patricia Simmons met me at the community center to hand me a check, and I could see the relief on her face. "The contractors made it through about an hour ago," she said. "They're already working on the worst damage. You've helped save several homes today, Mr. Jensen. Just doing my job." It's more than that. A lot of contractors would have refused to come out in these conditions or would have charged double. You didn't. I shrugged. I live here too, not in the HOA technically, but still part of the community. She smiled. "You're more a part of this community than some people who are in the HOA. Thank you." Over the next few days, things slowly returned to normal. The roads got properly cleared once professional services could get through. Contractors worked around the clock to repair damaged homes. The temperature rose just enough to start melting the massive amounts of snow, though that created its own problems with flooding and ice dams. True to her word, Deborah called for an emergency vote to rescind the tire chain ban. It passed unanimously. She also sent me a formal letter of apology, acknowledging that her enforcement attempts had been overreaching and that she'd let personal opinions override community safety. I appreciated the gesture, even if it felt like too little too late. The real vindication came in February during the special election Tom had mentioned. Deborah chose not to run for re-election as president, instead stepping down to a regular board member position. Tom Mitchell won the presidency by a landslide, and several other reasonable people got elected to the board. One of Tom's first acts as president was to formally recognize that my property, while technically adjacent to HOA-managed areas, was completely autonomous and exempt from any HOA rules or regulations that didn't involve direct safety issues. He also proposed a new policy that any rule changes affecting basic safety practices like winter driving would require input from relevant experts and a 2/3 majority vote. Life got quieter after that. Deborah and I developed a sort of neutral relationship. We weren't friends, but she'd stop and wave if she saw me working outside. Once she even brought me a cup of coffee when I was helping jump-start her neighbor's car on a cold morning. Small gestures, but they meant something. The whole experience taught me something about HOAs, though. They can be great when they're run by reasonable people focused on actual community improvement. But they can turn into nightmares when someone decides their personal preferences matter more than common sense or safety. The power dynamics are weird because everyone involved is theoretically equal, but whoever ends up in charge has a lot of ability to make other people's lives difficult if they want to. Spring came, and with it came the annual HOA meeting where they reviewed the past year. Tom invited me to attend as a guest, saying he wanted to recognize my help during the winter storms. I almost said no, since I'm not much for public recognition, but Frank convinced me to go. The meeting was held at the community center on a pleasant evening in April. About 60 people showed up, way more than usually attended these things. Tom ran through the standard business, financial reports and maintenance schedules and upcoming projects. Then he got to new business. "Before we wrap up, I want to recognize someone who really exemplified what it means to be a good neighbor this past winter," Tom said. "Connor Jensen isn't technically part of our HOA, but he's been more helpful to this community than most of us who are. During the January storm, he worked for over 30 hours straight helping people, and then he cleared our roads when our contracted service couldn't get through. He did this despite having been treated unfairly by previous HOA leadership." There was applause, and I felt my face getting hot. "I'm not good with attention," Tom continued. "I think we owe Connor an apology as a community, and I want to make sure everyone knows that going forward, he's welcome here and his business is valued. We're also implementing new policies to make sure we don't make similar mistakes in the future." More applause. A few people came up to me afterward to shake my hand and thank me for various times I'd helped them out over the years. It was nice, if a bit overwhelming. Deborah approached me near the end of the evening. She looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she should say anything. "That was a nice thing Tom said," she finally offered. "It was. I meant my apology, you know. I really did think I was doing the right thing." "I know you did. That's what made it so frustrating," she nodded. "I've learned a lot from this, about listening to people who have actual expertise, about not letting my own preferences override practical considerations, about the difference between protecting something and controlling it. Those are good lessons. For what it's worth, you were right about everything. The chains, the roads, all of it. I was wrong." I looked at this woman who'd made my life difficult for months, who tried to find me and restrict my business and generally make me miserable. She looked tired and smaller somehow, like the experience had worn something away. I couldn't find it in me to stay angry. "We're good," I said. Clean slate. The relief on her face was obvious. "Thank you. And if you ever need anything from the HOA, you let me know. I might not be president anymore, but I can still make things happen." I'll keep that in mind. Life continued on. Summer brought its own kind of business, with people needing help with breakdowns and flat tires instead of winter weather problems. I expanded my shop a bit, adding another bay and hiring an assistant mechanic named Jake who just graduated from technical school. Business was good. The subdivision settled into a more reasonable rhythm under Tom's leadership. They upgraded their snow removal contract, making sure they had reliable service with backup options. They started consulting with local professionals before implementing new rules. The whole atmosphere became less about rigid control and more about actual community improvement. I even ended up going to a few more HOA meetings just to stay informed about what was happening. It felt less adversarial and more collaborative. People would ask my opinion on things related to vehicles or winter preparation, and I appreciated being treated as a resource rather than a problem. October came around again, marking a full year since the whole tire chain debacle had started. The HOA held a fall festival, complete with food trucks and games for kids and a small concert by a local band. I set up a table offering free vehicle safety checks, making sure people's tires and batteries were ready for winter. Deborah stopped by my table with her teenage daughter. "This is a great service you're providing," she said. "Just trying to help people be prepared. Winter will be here before we know it. Would you mind checking my BMW? I want to make sure everything's in good shape, and I was thinking about getting proper winter tires this year. What do you recommend?" We talked for a while about tire options and winter preparation. Her daughter asked questions about how cars worked, apparently interested in maybe becoming a mechanic herself. I gave her some advice about technical schools and apprenticeships, encouraged her to pursue it if she was really interested. As they walked away, Frank came over and handed me a beer from the truck selling them for the festival. That was a sight I never thought I'd see. You and Deborah having a friendly conversation about car maintenance. "People can change," I said. "Sometimes they just need the right motivation. Getting stuck in a ditch during a blizzard is pretty good motivation." We laughed. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the subdivision. Kids were running around playing, adults were chatting and laughing, and everything felt peaceful. This was what an HOA was supposed to create, I thought. A sense of community, of people looking out for each other. The first snow came in late November that year, a light dusting that barely covered the ground. I was in my shop working on a transmission replacement when Deborah's BMW pulled into my parking area. She got out carrying a box. "I brought cookies," she said. "My daughter and I made them. Consider it a very late thank you for everything last winter and for encouraging her interest in mechanics. She's been watching YouTube videos about engines nonstop." "That's great. Tell her she can come by the shop anytime if she wants to watch actual work being done. Best way to learn." "I'll do that." She hesitated, then said, "I know I apologized before, but I wanted to say again how sorry I am for the way I treated you. The chain ban, the attempted fines, all of it. It was wrong and it was petty and it could have been dangerous. Water under the bridge. Maybe for you. I still think about it sometimes, about how badly things could have gone if someone had gotten seriously hurt because they couldn't use chains. That would have been on me. But it didn't happen, and you fixed the problem when you realized it was wrong. That's what matters." She nodded, looking relieved. "Well, enjoy the cookies. My daughter wants to know if she can come by this weekend to watch you work." "Saturday afternoon works. I'll be doing brake work on a few vehicles. She can see the whole process." After she left, I opened the box of cookies. They were good, clearly homemade with actual care put into them. I ate two while finishing the transmission work, thinking about how strange life could be. A year ago, this woman had been threatening me with fines and legal action. Now she was bringing me cookies and asking if I'd mentor her daughter. Saturday afternoon, Deborah's daughter, whose name I learned was Sophie, showed up right on time. She was 15, tall and gangly in the way teenagers are, with her mother's sharp eyes but without the hardness. She was genuinely interested in everything, asking intelligent questions and taking notes on her phone. "Why did you decide to be a mechanic?" she asked while I was installing new brake pads on a Honda Civic. "I like fixing things," I said. "I like taking something that's broken and making it work again. Plus, there's good job security. People always need their vehicles running. My mom says you saved a lot of people last winter during the big storm." I just did what needed doing. A lot of other people did the same. "But you did it even though my mom had been mean to you. That's pretty cool." I glanced at her. "Your mom tell you about all that, some of it, and I heard her talking to my dad about it. She felt really bad. She apologized. We're good now." Sophie watched as I finished the brake job, then helped me test the work to make sure everything was functioning properly. She had good hands for the work, careful but confident. I told her so and she beamed. She came back the next Saturday and the one after that. By December, it was a regular thing. She'd show up Saturday afternoons and I'd teach her basic maintenance. How to change oil, replace filters, check fluid levels, all the fundamental stuff that every driver should know but most don't. Jake enjoyed having another person around too, and he was closer to her age, so he could explain things in ways that made sense to a teenager. Deborah would pick Sophie up and always spent a few minutes chatting. We'd talk about neighborhood news, upcoming HOA votes, her daughter's progress. It was friendly, casual, the kind of relationship I had with most of my neighbors. The contentious history faded into something that had happened, but didn't define us anymore. Winter came in full force again in January, though not as bad as the previous year. The subdivision was better prepared this time. Roads got plowed promptly, people had proper winter tires or chains ready, and nobody got stuck trying to climb Ridgeline Drive in a luxury SUV with summer tires. I still stayed busy with towing and emergency calls, but it was manageable. The HOA had even approved a proposal to keep my number on their emergency contact list, recognizing that having a local towing service was valuable for the community. One evening in late February, I got a call from Tom Mitchell. "Connor, got a minute? I want to run something by you." Sure, what's up? The board is considering creating an advisory committee for winter safety and emergency preparedness. We want people with actual expertise helping us make decisions. Would you be willing to serve on it? I'm not in the HOA, I reminded him. We know. But this would be a formal role as an outside consultant. You'd have a voice in planning and policy making for anything related to winter roads, vehicle safety, and emergency response. Paid position too, not a huge amount but enough to compensate for your time. I thought about it. A year ago, I would have refused just on principle, wanting nothing to do with HOA politics. But things were different now. The HOA was different, trying to actually serve the community instead of control it. Okay, I said, I'll do it. The advisory committee turned out to be a good group. Besides me, there was a retired firefighter, a nurse, a civil engineer, and a woman who worked in county emergency management. We met once a month to review policies and make recommendations. It was actually interesting, getting to help shape how the community prepared for and responded to emergencies. We implemented several good changes. Better snow removal contracts with multiple backup providers. Community emergency supply caches located strategically around the subdivision. A phone tree system for checking on elderly residents during severe weather. Simple stuff, but it made a real difference. Spring arrived again, and with it came the annual HOA elections. Tom ran for president again and won easily. Deborah ran for vice president and also won. Seeing her name on the ballot had been surprising, but she'd campaigned on a platform of learning from past mistakes and focusing on practical community improvements. People appreciated the honesty. At the post-election meeting, Tom announced the results and then opened the floor for discussion. A newer resident raised his hand. I just moved here last fall, he said, and I keep hearing references to the Great Chain Ban. What was that about? There was laughter throughout the room. Tom grinned. That's become a bit of legendary status around here. Deborah, you want to explain it? Deborah stood up, and I could see she was slightly embarrassed but also willing to own it. A couple of years ago, I made a very bad decision as HOA president. I banned the use of tire chains on neighborhood roads, thinking I was protecting the infrastructure. What I actually did was create a safety hazard and make a lot of people's lives difficult, especially Connor Jensen, who runs the towing service. She gestured to where I was sitting. Connor was right about everything and I was wrong, very wrong. It took getting stuck in a ditch during a blizzard for me to realize it, but eventually I figured it out. We rescinded the ban, I apologized, and we implemented better policies for making sure safety comes before aesthetics or personal preferences. The lesson, Tom added, is that we're always learning, and we're better off when we listen to people with expertise instead of just doing what sounds good. That's why we have our advisory committee now. The new resident nodded, seeming satisfied with the explanation. The meeting moved on to other topics. Afterward, several people were standing around talking. Sophie was there with her mother, having come to see the HOA process in action. She pulled me aside. Mr. Jensen, I got accepted to the Technical College Automotive program. I start in the fall. That's fantastic, Sophie. Congratulations. I wouldn't have even considered it if you hadn't let me work in your shop, so thank you. Deborah joined us, smiling. We're very proud of her and grateful to you for being a mentor. She's going to be a great mechanic, I said. She's got the aptitude and the work ethic. I'm also thinking about specializing in heavy equipment, Sophie said. Tow trucks and plows and stuff like that. There aren't many women in that field. There should be more, I said. Let me know when you're ready for an internship. I might have a spot for you. Her face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. We talked for a while longer about her plans and goals. It felt good to see someone young and excited about the trade, especially someone who genuinely cared about doing quality work. The summer passed peacefully. Business was steady. Sophie came by the shop whenever she had free time, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Jake and I taught her everything we could. By August, she could do an oil change faster than some professional quick lube places, and with better attention to detail. October came around again, marking 2 years since the chain ban crisis. The HOA held another fall festival, bigger than the previous year. I ran the same free vehicle safety check station, and it was busy the whole time. People were taking winter preparation seriously now, having learned from experience. Deborah stopped by with her husband, a quiet man named Richard who worked in IT. "Vehicle's running great," she said. "The winter tires you recommended last year made such a difference." "Good to hear. You all set for this winter?" "I think so. New tires, emergency kit in the car, and I actually learned how to install chains just in case. Haven't needed them yet, but at least I know how." "That's smart. Hope you never need them, but better to be prepared." Richard spoke up. "I wanted to thank you for what you've done for Sophie. She talks about your shop constantly. You've really inspired her. She's a good kid with a lot of potential. I'm just helping her develop it." "It's more than that," Deborah said. "You gave her confidence and direction. That's a gift." They moved on to check out the other festival activities, and I went back to inspecting vehicles. Frank came by again with beers, a tradition now apparently. 2 years since the great drama," he said. "Look how far we've come." "It's been a good couple of years," I agreed. "You know what I think? I think that whole mess with the chain ban was the best thing that could have happened to this community. It shook people up, made them realize that HOAs need to be run by reasonable people making practical decisions. Maybe, or maybe it just showed what was always there. Good people who wanted to do right by their neighbors once they had the chance. Philosophical today, are we?" I laughed. "Just tired. It's been a long day." The first major snow of that winter hit in December, right before Christmas. We were ready for it. The roads got cleared promptly, everyone had proper equipment, and there were no major emergencies. I spent the day doing routine calls, jump starts, and minor slide-offs. Nothing dramatic. That evening my phone rang. It was Tom. "Connor, just wanted to let you know that the board met today. We voted to name you Resident of the Year, even though you're not technically a resident. We're calling it Community Member of the Year instead." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not, but we want to do it anyway. There'll be a small ceremony at the January meeting. You don't have to give a speech or anything, just show up and let us say thank you properly." "Okay, I can do that." "Good, and Connor, thanks for everything you do. This is a better place because you're part of it." After we hung up, I sat in my truck for a while watching the snow fall. It had been a long journey from that first confrontation with Deborah over my business trucks, through the chain ban stupidity, to this. I'd learned things too, about patience and forgiveness, and giving people room to change. The January meeting came, and true to Tom's word, they presented me with a plaque and a lot of kind words. Sophie was there, beaming with pride like I was her personal accomplishment. Deborah led the applause. The whole thing was embarrassing and touching in equal measure. Afterward, an older woman I didn't know well approached me. "I just wanted to say thank you. You pulled my car out of a ditch 3 years ago during a snowstorm. You charged me half what you should have because you knew I was on a fixed income. I've never forgotten that kindness." "Just trying to help," I said. "You do more than help. You care. That's rare." Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. People I'd helped over the years, sometimes without even realizing the impact. It was humbling. On my way out, Deborah caught up with me. "That was nice, wasn't it? Seeing how much people appreciate you." "It was." Unexpected, but nice. You know what I think about sometimes? What if I'd succeeded with that chain ban? What if I'd actually managed to fine you or drive you out of the neighborhood? How many people would have suffered for my stubbornness? But you didn't. You learned and changed. That's what matters. I hope so. She looked at the plaque I was carrying. You deserve that recognition, Connor. You've been a better neighbor to all of us than we probably deserved. We're a community. We look out for each other. That's how it's supposed to work. She smiled. Yes, yes, it is. I drove home that night thinking about community, about HOAs and what they could be versus what they sometimes became. At their best, they were groups of neighbors working together to make everyone's lives better. At their worst, they were petty dictatorships run by people who cared more about rules than people. Pine Ridge had been heading toward the worst, but it had pulled back and become something better. Not perfect, but better. And I'd played a part in that, just by refusing to back down when I was right and being willing to help even when I had every reason to hold a grudge. Spring came again. Sophie completed her first year of technical college with top grades and immediately started an internship at my shop. She was there 30 hours a week, learning everything she could. I started teaching her towing operations, how to safely hook vehicles, how to assess accident scenes, all the complex stuff that separated good operators from great ones. I want to start my own business someday, she told me one afternoon while we were recovering a car from a ditch. Maybe in 10 years after I get experience and save up money. That's a good goal. Running your own business is hard but rewarding. Did you ever think about giving up? Like when my mom was making things difficult with the HOA. Sure. But giving up because things are hard isn't really my style. Good thing. Otherwise, I'd probably be planning to study something boring like business management instead of getting to do this. We winched the car up onto the flatbed, Sophie handling the controls under my supervision. She was getting good, her movements confident and precise. The years that followed were good ones. The HOA continued functioning well under reasonable leadership. Sophie graduated from technical college and became a full-time employee at my shop, eventually taking over most of the towing operations. Jake specialized in heavy equipment repair, and we expanded the business to handle larger commercial contracts. Deborah served as vice president for 2 terms, then as president for 1, and by all accounts did a good job. She was practical, listened to advice, and prioritized safety and community welfare over appearances. People respected her for owning her past mistakes and learning from them. I stayed on the Winter Safety Advisory Committee, helping to refine policies and procedures. Every winter ran smoothly. No major emergencies. No one getting stuck and needing rescue because of inadequate equipment. The chain ban became a cautionary tale told to new residents, a reminder of what not to do. 5 years after the chain ban incident, the HOA held a special celebration for the subdivision's 50th anniversary. There were displays showing the neighborhood's history, old photos and newspaper clippings, stories from longtime residents. Someone had even created a timeline of major events. Right there on the timeline, between new playground built 2019 and community center renovated 2023, was an entry for 2021. Tire chain ban crisis and reversal leads to HOA reform. Frank and I stood looking at it, shaking our heads. "You're part of neighborhood history now," Frank said. The man who stood up to the tyranny of Deborah Harrison. That's not exactly how it happened. That's how it'll be remembered, though. The legend grows with time. Deborah appeared beside us, looking at the timeline. "I can't believe they put that up there." "It's part of the history," I said. "Can't pretend it didn't happen." "I suppose not. Though I wish my legacy was something other than banning tire chains. Your legacy is learning from a mistake and helping make the community better, I said. The chain ban is just the starting point of that story. She looked at me, surprised. That's generous of you. It's the truth. Tom joined our group, carrying plates of food from the anniversary buffet. The famous four, he said. Connor, who stood firm, Deborah, who learned better, Frank, who witnessed it all, and me, who helped clean up the mess. We should write a book. Please don't, Deborah and I said simultaneously, then laughed. The celebration continued around us, neighbors enjoying food and conversation, kids playing games, everyone just being part of a community that worked. It wasn't perfect, because nothing involving people ever is. But it was good, and it was functional, and it was built on lessons learned the hard way. As the sun set and the party wound down, I stood with my plaque from years ago, now mounted in my shop, but brought to the celebration for the historical display. Sophie was there with her boyfriend. Jake was there with his wife and new baby. Deborah and Richard were there looking proud of their contributions. Frank and his wife, Tom and the current board members, all the people who made up this complicated, imperfect, worthwhile community. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to run his business in peace, Frank said. Not bad at all, I agreed. The tire chains that had caused so much trouble years ago hung on the wall of my shop now, clean and oiled and ready for use. Every winter, when the first snow fell, I'd install them on my trucks and head out to help whoever needed it. And every winter, I'd remember that sometimes the biggest battles are about the smallest things, and that standing firm on principle matters. But I'd also remember that people can change, that communities can heal, and that sometimes the best resolution to a conflict is just helping someone when they need it, even if they don't deserve it. Especially if they don't deserve it. That's what being part of a community means.